Welcome to Presents. I'm your host, Ben Kizer. My guests this week are ambassadors to the U.S. from the Kingdom of the Netherlands and Germany. Henne Schuwer began his career with the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs back in 1979, and for over 39 years, he's held positions in countries such as Vietnam, India, Belgium, and the U.S. Before becoming Germany's ambassador to the U.S., Emily Haber worked with the Federal Ministry of the Interior, serving as state secretary at the height of Europe's refugee crisis, and worked closely with U.S. officials in the war on terror. Due to her time in the German embassy in Moscow, she also holds extensive knowledge into Russian-Soviet affairs. Both ambassadors are here as an effort between the Center for a New American Security and Global Public Policy Institute called Across the Pond and in the Field, where 2 Americans and 2 Europeans travel to 12 cities across the U.S. in search of bipartisan discussion. The project has many goals, but first and foremost, it aims to help reinvigorate the transatlantic partnership by holding discussions and debates with audiences across America. Please join me in welcoming Ambassadors Henne Schuwer and Emily Haber. It's a pleasure to have you both on the show.
Thank you.
So I think first and foremost, foreign policy, foreign relations is very important. And I was curious on some of your thoughts as you know, this traveling and these meetings and these discussions as a solution to strengthening foreign relations. Do you think that's a good thing? Is this the best way to go about it? To whoever wants to answer first.
Well, of course I think it's a good thing. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. We don't live in the 19th century anymore. You don't do diplomacy behind closed doors or within the beltways of capitals. The United States is such a large and such a diverse country. You need to travel. You need to speak to as many people as you possibly can to understand what things are changing, why they're changing, where we see eye to eye, where we have different perceptions, perhaps different expectations, and what to do about it. That's, again, not something you do only with administration officials. You need to do it with the country.
I think what Emily says is, of course, totally right. I think it has come even more into focus after the last elections, where I think many people in Washington, and I was in Washington at that time, were taken by surprise. And I think that part of the answer to the question why happened what happened is lying outside the beltway. So we come also looking for some answers. Also, I think it's a give and take. We are also bringing some information about our own countries. Right. So we are trying to talk with, in this case, people in Idaho about what's happening in Europe, and we want to learn from people in Idaho. What do you think is happening in the United States? What does move you at the moment?
So was it this change in administration the catalyst for something like this? Or do you think this was necessary regardless of another candidate had entered the White House?
It's necessary because such are the times. Again, politics or diplomacy doesn't happen in the comfort zone of ambassadorial residences anymore. You need to go out. Everyone needs to do it. I'm sure the American ambassador to Holland and the German ambassador the American ambassador to Germany will do the same thing. Travel the country, talk to people, see where we see eye to eye, see where there are differences, and see what we can do about it. That's what we plan to do, that's what we meant to do, and we would do it in any event.
I think for my country, they say I'm considerably smaller, the Netherlands considerably smaller than Germany, and also, of course, much smaller than the United States. The United States is 20 times bigger than the Netherlands. But there are states that are our size, that are a better fit in a way for the Netherlands. So we are looking also for those states and say, well, hey, we are the same size. We have an economy that matches. And so that's also where we already, before the elections, of course, we went out to states where there are either a lot of Dutch people or people from Dutch ancestry. In this case, for instance, what binds us here with Idaho is potatoes. We have a big potato industry, you have a big potato industry. Well, you know what, let's see what we can do together, and lo and behold, we do things together, and you build on that.
So you mentioned size, and you mentioned maybe industry and ancestry as being some factors, but what do you know, Boise is not the biggest city, right? We're not New York, we're not LA. What do you see as being some benefits to targeting demographics in these smaller cities and reaching out to some of the smaller populations in the U.S.? What are some benefits to that?
Just to mention one example, Boise is a very fast-growing town. Mm-hmm. We have fast-growing towns in Germany too. I think it's interesting to just compare notes. What are the challenges? How to deal with them? How to go forward? What will be the future of work or the future of cities? So that's something you discuss. You can discuss with Boise. That many other issues too. Mm-hmm. But that's a very good example.
It's the same. While walking in here, you see all the bikes standing. We are a country. We have more bikes than people in the Netherlands. We can talk about what do we do to make biking safer, more easy. What did we do? Accessible. What did we do in the Netherlands? Can we share some intelligence with Idaho, with Boise? So those are very small things. And there's one other thing. Not all, but many of our entrepreneurs who come to the United States say, okay, they want to go to California, they want to go to New York, and whatever, they want to make it big. And our answer always is, well, are you sure? Why don't you try to get your feet wet in a place that's a little bit smaller, see if it works there, and then you can move up to the bigger places. But you have more chances of making it in a smaller place, in a more friendly place.
Or somewhere that's a new market or a growing market.
So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's something that we would try to advocate.
And so sorry, go ahead.
But it's not only about similarities. I fully take the point. America is not only the coasts or the large cities, which perhaps in the past have been more in the focus of public diplomacy. America is so much more. And that's why we want to talk in Idaho not only about things where we have common interests or common experiences. We don't only want to talk about the future of growing towns or about bicycles. We want to talk about energy or defense or the future of work. Mm-hmm. Just to mention one example, we're going to, in the framework of the year-long German program that we are planning for 2018 and 2019, we're organizing town hall meetings in Boise as well, and we're going to bring experts and journalists and business people and politicians together in order to discuss these large issues and again to compare notes, because that's basically what we need to have in our times, in our hyper-connected world. We need a dialogue. We need a dialogue within the family that we are in the transatlantic partnership.
Are there any issues that you've noticed that you think are going to be particularly important to Boise or Americans that you're going to encounter? Whether it's immigration, maybe it's energy, maybe it's something like that. Can you pick out one or two of those that you think are maybe going to be some of the more important ones that they're going to want to focus on, or maybe that you want to focus on?
Well, I did not come with very fixed expectations, because basically I want to listen and I want to hear what's important to people here, how they see Germany, what may be the criticism they direct against Germany or the expectations they have. So I'm not coming here to with very clear-cut perceptions or expectations.
Mm-hmm.
International trade.
International trade.
I think we are a trading nation par excellence. We get more or less 50% of our GDP is from trade. We are very concerned about the way, or if the international trade remains free and fair as it is. And we want to talk also, I think here in Idaho, there are a number of international companies here. What do they think about international trade? So I think, and we want to explain what's happening in Europe. We want to hear what's happening in the US and what makes the US tick in international trade.
I think that's perfectly understandable. And from my understanding of across the pond and in the field is that it's avoiding being a lecture series, and it's more about this discussion. But if there was anything that you would want to really get across to the demographic that you're going to, what's going on in Europe, what would that be?
Not so much in Europe as in general.
Or your country specifically, or in general.
Yeah. After the Second World War, we built a new international liberal world order. Mm-hmm. We have greatly benefited on both sides of the Atlantic from the structure that we put in place. Now, I very well understand that after 70, 80 years, the world has changed and there are changes that we have to make. And I think on both sides of the ocean, we realize that that's it. But we want to make the changes together. We want to stay into the international world, or we want to stay into NATO, into WTO, IMF, all UN system, and we want US and Europe to say these things we have to change in order to make it viable for the next 70 or 80 years. And I think that's something that we want to discuss. And we want to, and it's not only for here, I think all our EU embassies are going out and drumming up support and say, we share a common set of values, let's build on that, and it hasn't changed since 1950, roughly, when we made all these organizations, and let's build on that together again.
I can only reinforce that point. But not only has the transatlantic relationship changed, which is something normal, relationships change all the time as conditions and contexts change, and as the conditions to which we are mutually exposed to change. But what has also considerably shifted, and not in the West's favor, is the international strategic landscape that confronts both of us. I'm speaking about China, I'm speaking about Russia, I'm speaking about failing states that fuel terrorism across the world. These are huge, huge challenges and threats. And given that, we feel it's important to underscore the necessity to work hand in glove and to use our respective leveraging power in order to confront what threatens both of us, the US and the European Union jointly.
Mm-hmm. And so you spoke a little bit about, the next 70 years, right? And what are some things, we're facing these common threats, these failing states, terrorism, Russia, China. What are things that the US are doing right? What are the things that we're doing wrong? How is our foreign policy looking right now in your eyes, maybe from your country's, Europe's perspective?
It's difficult. Let's say, I think that the point is we seek reassurance in a way. We seek reassurance that both sides of the oceans are still, let's say, will work hand in glove to build the next 70 to 80 years. We don't know if that the same disposition is there on both sides of the ocean. Sometimes it looked like absolutely, and sometimes there is a certain hesitation to express what we want to hear, what the United States want to hear. I think we want to rebuild that, and I think that's what that's part of the job of an embassy. Create those bonds between the two countries, and that's what we're doing.
Well, obviously there are disagreements between the European Union and the United States. And obviously in these agreements, Europeans will think they're right, and Americans will think they're right on their side. You see, it's not about that. There will always be disagreement between partners and friends. It's normal. What's important is the way we tackle them, we manage them, and if possible, how we solve them. Mm-hmm. And what is even more important, and should be the headline of everything, is we're in it together. We're aligned. We're aligned given the changing international strategic landscape. And let's not forget what we really want, because that would be the dumbest thing we could do. And what we really want is to handle and tackle the challenges that threaten the way we want to live, and the way we want others to have democratic choices too, by the way. Mm-hmm. That's what's key, and that's what we agree upon.
Does any part of you fear backlash or we're in this together, right? And so there are populations that are harder to reach, maybe they're stubborn, they're whatever. Does any part of you, when you embark on something like this, fear of that backlash? Or are you, believers in the content and the discussion being enough to make that establishment that we're in this together?
I don't feel any backlash. I feel openness to embark in discussions, to identify each other's points of view, to identify the shared ground, and to analyze where we don't share common views. That's what's important, and that's what families do.
Right.
We, in the Netherlands, we have one of our character traits in common with the Americans. Blunt is a virtue in the Netherlands. So it is here. So we can basically, what you see is what you get, and we can speak our minds. And exactly as Emily, I don't feel backlash. I feel from time to time an honest difference of opinion. But it doesn't mean also, so to say in Dutch, that we can have a beer together afterwards. We still remain friends, and I won't say we agree to disagree, but we want to talk about the difference that we have. And even that, I think in a number of big issues, differences are not there for the goals that we want to achieve. The differences are there in the way we want to get from A to B. Yeah. You Americans, and also I think under this administration, you are impatient. I think we are more patient. We are willing to take a longer period and a more circumspect period to get from A to B. The United States wants to do it quicker. And yeah, we are talking about the way that we achieve our goals at the moment.
We've become very, result-oriented. And have you seen anything, because you said under this administration, is there something that's been a main catalyst towards that, that's kind of changed our ability to wait, circumvent, be more patient? Has something arisen that you think may have caused something like that?
Well, some issues you don't solve the way we should like to solve them. Some issues simply evolve, and once you've come to a solution, they will trigger a whole set of new challenges and issues. So in general, I think in diplomacy, you're well advised if you take the longer view and don't don't frame the world in terms of bullet points.
True.
Yeah, it's not that you have to have a win situation. I think that the essence of allies, and we are allies of the United States, and the EU and the NATO have been allies for a long, long time. The essence of allies is also that you might do something for your ally, which is not immediately to your own benefit, but you'll do it because that country is your ally and you want to go and help them. I think that is also the notion has to come back, that not everything has to have a benefit immediately at the end. I think the benefit is a longer term benefit that you have an ally. And because of doing this, the ally will be a stronger ally also for the longer run.
So do you see the rise of that hyper-nationalism kind of being detrimental to our relationships going on in the future?
Well, let's be honest. Also in Europe, there is a rise of nationalism. I always say I'm born in 1953. If I would have been born in 1853, I would have experienced the Franco-German War. I would have been by now sort of at the end of the First World War, and if I would have survived all that, I would go into the Second World War. I'm born in 1953. I have not experienced one day of war. For me as a European, that's exceptional, and I think that you have to learn from that, from our history, how amazingly lucky I am, and then I have to look at the reasons why I am so lucky, what made this long period of peace. And I realized that long period of peace, for a big part, is the transatlantic relationship, is the Pax Americana, is the Marshall Plan, is the European Union, is NATO. And I value those settlements, those organizations for giving me the life that I've had, and I think the life that I can give to my children. I want to have my children to have the same life, so I want to continue it.
Well, I couldn't have put it better. It's true, and the observation is in place, that you would probably have to go centuries back to look for such a long period of peace between in phases of big power competition as we've seen it in the post-war period. And again, due to the intense web of alliances that have been built under American leadership and which, looking back after 9/11, has produced the first time that Article 5 of the NATO alliance was invoked.
Interesting. And so, I understand you wrote your dissertation on, was it post-World War I?
Pre-World War I.
Pre-World War I, right?
Yes.
And so has that in your career enabled you, because I also know that you worked with the U.S. on war on terror, correct? Has that given you, a foresight that maybe other officials haven't maybe had, or anything like that, to handle these types of debates, or is the modern climate and the modern situation just as relevant as history in that instance?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would quote Kissinger, who had called the pre-First World War period as a diplomatic doomsday machine. He said that because there were no alliances. There were no steadfast partnerships. There wasn't a system of rules and regulations that determined international behavior. It was like a Hobbesian jungle. And what it taught me, and what I think has taught a lot of scholars, was in order to contain and achieve peace in big power competition, you need a framework, you need rules, you need one sort of order, which of course is constantly evolving. You need regulation, you need a web of intricate agreements that constrain behavior. And that's what, again, under American leadership has been shaped in the post-World War II period, where the experiences of the pre-World War I period certainly were the template.
Is the way that we've handled such situations shape the way that maybe your country or maybe the Netherlands has handled their own post-war? And I know that you've stated that you have not been, you haven't seen a war and things like that, but has that affected the European policy in terms of handling?
Of course,
Mm-hmm.
of course. It was the backdrop of the jungle, if you like, of non-existing rules, alliances, regulations or constraints that produced, at the end of the day, 2 world wars. And it informed strategic thinking after World War II, largely thanks to visionary American strategists.
So I want to circle back a little bit to finishing up toward talking about across the pond and in the field. And so when you are going out here and you're talking with these individuals, how much of this is a discussion, and then how much of this is a fact-finding mission? How much do you take back with yourselves and you say, these are the ideas that we're hearing from these folks, how can we reevaluate our own circumstances, things like that?
It's both,
Mm-hmm.
and it's intrinsically linked. I never go any place only to lecture. I always intend to learn something from it, to see a new angle, and it always adds a new dimension to the way I frame things.
Yeah, I think in a way you start by asking questions, because I want to know what people are thinking here, what's happening, and they answer my question, they give me an answer, and then they immediately say, okay, and what do you think about it? So it's a dialogue, and I think that is how we and how CNES wants to frame this. This is a true dialogue, an exchange of views, and by doing so, we learn more from what the other party thinks.
Has this dialogue been exceptionally different from some of the other countries that you've spent time in, which I understand was like Vietnam, India, Belgium?
Well, Vietnam was in 1970-79, and I can tell you there was no dialogue then. Certainly not.
I'm sure not.
Certainly not. No, yeah, there is a difference. The United States is the superpower. The United States is the most important country in the world. So by coming here, and I represent a much smaller country, and what you were talking with Emily earlier about, 17 million, a state as big as in diameter as Delaware or Maryland or whatever, we live by international organization and international. We cannot operate on our own. We have to have allies and so on. This is our oldest and biggest ally. Yeah, there is a difference by operating here than operating in Belgium or even in India. Absolutely.
So, in the interest of time, just one final question. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with today? Maybe it's advice, something to think about, food for thought, on this transatlantic partnership, this foreign policy strengthening?
Never forget what you really want. And what we really want, given all the changes, is confront what threatens our way of life jointly and as friends. We may have differences. I think that's completely normal, but they're not strategic, and it's not about us. So the way we deal with our differences should be as families do, and for the rest, let's not for a minute forget that we are in the same boat.
Exactly the same, plus I would say we are here at the university. I always tell young people, come and travel. I have 2 of my kids studied for a year here in the United States. I think that's been an eye-opening experience, and I would love to see American kids come and study, travel in Europe and see what we think of things. And because this is the future generation, let them make the bonds together. And also with the modern social media and whatever, you can stay in touch with each other and can exchange your ideas.
Well, I'd like to thank both of you for taking time out of your schedules to sit down and talk with me today. I think it's been super beneficial. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you to the ambassadors for coming on the show today. As always, I'm your host, and this has been Presents. We'll see you next time.